gentlemen, good afternoon. You are in the zone with Rich Sutter and Pete Coles. It's a beautiful, beautiful Thursday afternoon here in Western Massachusetts. A brief respite from the winter that we've been having. It's great outside today. It's probably in the mid 50s, and they're calling for a little bit balmier weather over the weekend, Pete, so we're looking pretty good. So we would like to just jump off with Feed 'em Fish in the section there. But before we get into all of that, we can go ahead and throw up the logo, Pete. But I wanted you to just illuminate last night on. You were there for a pretty historic moment in college basketball, absolutely.
Yeah, I got to go to the XL Center in Hartford to watch UConn women's basketball and watched UConn easily handle Seton Hall and give Gino Auriemma, Hall of Fame coach, his 1,200th victory in D1. Amazing.
Fastest coach in Division I, did you say?
Yep, fastest coach to 1,200 in D1.
That is unbelievable. It's also humbling when you sit here, and I know that I've been coaching a pretty long time, but I'm somewhere 800 wins behind that. You know, that's really, really humbling. So it's a great accomplishment for Coach Auriemma and the UConn program. But right into the NBA Fish we go. Joel Embiid of the 76ers is now going to be out for a prolonged period of time due to some knee issues. And he will now probably not be eligible under the new NBA 65-game rule, which allows only for qualification for the postseason tournament, such as MVP and Defensive Player of the Year, some other awards that the NBA gives out. Now has a 65-game threshold, and it is probably likely out of consideration that Joel Embiid will repeat now as MVP. Even in a consideration for it. I think it might add a little clarity to the people that have to vote on it anyway. At least you know he's out. He's going to be out of it, won't be in consideration, and then the other players that are considered can get a due consideration as well.
How long do you think they're going to keep up with this before they change the rules back?
I think you might get some players' union issue here. The NBA has a union, and so that might get run through the players' union. It might get run through the courts. I don't know if they'll keep it forever. I think they'll get back into what the NBA does, and they'll work on it, adjust it, and come out with something even more egregious. So, Trae Young and my guy Scotty Barnes, and this is a great accomplishment for both of these gentlemen. They were both added to the All-Star list by Commissioner Adam Silver, which is a little bit of an interesting twist on how players are selected and appointed. It used to be a strict, they used to have those things where you'd go to the game and you'd punch out, in a baseball game and in the NBA game, you'd get your ballot and you'd go in there and you'd start punching out those little chads like you were voting. And they would give the ballots, add them up, and go from there. But right now, the commissioner has added, because of two injuries, you have Julius Randle, who's out, and you have now Joel Embiid, who's out. And they were two All-Stars. And so what you do now is you're going to replace them. Trae Young is having a great season, certainly deserving and belongs to be an All-Star. And my guy, Scotty Barnes, he shows up in more categories than Amazon. He does everything, and his stats are unbelievable. But it was interesting, and I wanted to share this with you and our viewers, Pete, that Trae Young is averaging 27 points and 10.9, almost 11 assists a game, and was not selected outright for the game.
Wow.
Had to be a commissioner's appointment. Scotty Barnes, listen to these numbers: 20 points, 8 rebounds, 6 assists, 1.5 steals, 1.2 blocks. He's all over the place.
Yeah.
He's doing great. I really love this young man as a player. Always liked him. He was very high on my draft board, and it was good to see that the Cavaliers went ahead and did, or the Raptors went ahead and drafted him where they did, because he's quite the player, and I think he's going to have a very bright future. Ricky Rubio, a mercurial point guard from Spain, had been in the NBA for a while and had stepped away from the game for mental health issues. And it's good to see Ricky re-sign with his Barcelona team back home and have a chance to play back in Spain and try and reclaim some of his career that's left of it, because he was certainly a great point guard. And a lot of this, you will see mental health issues becoming more and more prevalent with these young athletes going on. The pressure is immense, and the stage is big, and that can not always lend to certain situations, where you had in like rock and roll and some of these places when we were younger, there was so much drug and alcohol use that went on even during the performances. And so in basketball or anything like that, it's so hard to even kind of hide there like a lot of the other stars do. And that's what makes sports a little bit different than everything else, is that you'll be killing your own performance if you actually do that. And the same is probably everywhere, but there's nowhere to hide. And if you're talking about a team sport, it's a little easier. If you're talking about an individual sport, and they talk about that young tennis player, Coco, it's really, really out there. If you're a golfer and you're coming in and on Sunday and you're leading, the pressure is really, really immense. And I think there's going to be a new industry that's going to arise that's going to have a lot to do with trying to help and alleviate some of that stuff.
I think that they'll reinforce these kids because they just don't have the coping mechanisms to deal with this stuff.
I think it's always been a problem. People just didn't realize it, and we didn't have all of the medicine and the science and the stuff now to examine it a little bit. But I think you would see it if you looked back at some of the old baseball players and some of those guys. They hit it pretty hard and just went out every night and kind of took away the pressure that way. But again, I think there's a significant difference between a team sport and an individual sport too. Because a team sport you can always kind of hide and the blame can always be deflected. But sometimes in those other sports, it's very, very glaring. The spotlight can be glaring. All right, so the NBA trade deadline is approaching, and I was out on my social media feeds, and I threw this out there, and I said, this is what the Knicks should do right now, because the Knicks have a very good team. They're playing very, very well. Julius Randle is out right now, but I haven't been a big fan of Julius Randle. And so what I think the Knicks should do is try and trade him, Quentin Grimes, and Jericho Sims to the Lakers for LeBron James.
Whew.
Now, people that I put that out with on social media came back and said they thought I was offering up too much because I don't think they see that LeBron James's future is in the longevity end. But right now, you could bring a championship to New York, and that would be significant. New York hasn't had a championship in a while, and I think that would be significant. So as the trading deadline closes, I guess I was also hoping.
Is that fantasy booking though? Because he wants to stay close to his kid.
Yeah, I think that is probably something of a consideration as well. The other question is how long do they think Bronny would remain before he makes himself eligible for the draft as well? Because if he does have any dream of playing with his dad, then I think the time is now the enemy a little bit there. 20 seasons of LeBron being an all-star, I mean, time will add up and time will take its toll even on the great LeBron James. But there were a couple of trades that happened. One of the reasons that I floated that trade out there, and a friend of mine sent me a picture where after the game, LeBron James had a New York Knicks towel around his shoulders for some strange reason. And I thought it was very interesting, but I think that trade would shake things up. One of the reasons that I've been advocating for something is I just want to see a blockbuster. So far we've had kind of pieces moving around, and we'll talk about the two trades that just happened. We talked about some of the prior trades, but they haven't been like big blockbuster trades.
You're watching chess and you want a bazooka shot off.
Right. I want something big. I want something substantial. Trading deadline's coming to an end. Teams are getting ready for the playoffs. Who wants to make that move? Who's going to stand pat? I'd love to see that. But I would love to see my Knicks, who right now are playing with good basketball, and at the same time, if they could get Julius Randle out of a New York Knicks uniform, that has added bonus as well. So you're picking up the greatest player in the game, and you're offering up a lot, but Quentin Grimes is unhappy about his playing time. Jericho Sims is a project that's going to take some time. I think you can get a player like that in the draft this year and pick up somebody just as good as that. Although I do think he has a bright upside in the NBA in the future. And then Randle, he's got potential to be good out in L.A. I believe he might have been in L.A. at one time. But I think that adds a lot to the Knicks, and it would help the Lakers because the Lakers, as we alluded to last week, they have to get some help up front. They have to get some help in the guard situation. So that would alleviate some of their concerns as well. The two trades that did happen, I was a little surprised to see this one. The Memphis Grizzlies traded Steve Adams, their big man, longtime big man, for Victor Oladipo, which I think that leaves the Grizzlies a little bit. I guess the Grizzlies are saying that They have John Morant out for the year now. They have zero chance probably of getting into the playoffs currently. And so I think they're saying, let's just have a little bit of a sale here, a garage sale, and move some pieces around and maybe get ready for when Morant comes back and maybe pick up some pieces to try and help that. I think that really leaves them a little bit without depth at center, but I think they're in a bad spot. But they picked up, here's the other thing, too. They picked up a couple of second-round picks, in the draft. And if you looked at our draft back then, the second-round picks aren't that valuable anymore. So picking them up is kind of just picking up something that, might work out, might not work out. I mean, obviously, Luka was a second-round pick, so there is some average down there where you can make some money and get something done, some return on investment. But if you looked at last year's second round, there wasn't a whole lot in there that you would sit there and say it was something of value. And then you had the Heat and the Hornets kind of just swap pieces. The Heat gave up longtime point guard Kyle Lowry, and the Hornets sent them Terry Rozier, who's a scorer, and Lowry as a point guard. So if there's two teams in need of a thing, that just seemed like that was kind of a needs trade. And I think it's okay for either team. It's inconsequential. That's why I was looking for a big trade. Both of those guys have been in the NBA a long time. They're not going to change the dynamic for either one of those teams significantly. And that's what I'm looking for, something that changes that dynamic significantly. Okay, so we've been talking on this show quite a bit about Dirty Draymond. And we've even hashtagged it Dirty Draymond. We think the league should do something about it. And what I think the league should do about it is just get rid of him, because there's absolutely no place in the game. But right now we are ready to upgrade from Dirty Draymond into Dirty Incorporated, because we now have another gentleman, Dylan Brooks, who was from Oregon in college and played in the NBA for a while last year. You might remember him getting into some scuffles last year in the playoffs with some different people, and it's bad for the game. And these guys are professional athletes that are worth a lot of money, and there's no place in the game for it to happen. So we're ready to upgrade from Dirty Draymond to Dirty Incorporated and add Dylan Brooks and Draymond Green in as the two dirtiest players in the NBA currently, and they have no business being in the league because they're out there just trying to hurt people.
Got to have to start a crime counter for these two.
Yeah, if you added up all of it, you'd say what I'm saying. I think a lot of people would say, and I'm not trying to cut anybody's legs out. Draymond Green's at the end of his career. Let's close it up. Let's put him out in China or some other place where they might find that to be cool and amusing. In our league here, it's always been terrible. It's always been something that's been reviled and fought against. Bill Laimbeer back in the day with the Detroit Pistons, Rick Mahorn, they were some of the dirtiest players in the game, and nobody liked them. And it was dangerous. And Isaiah Thomas caught 65 stitches in his head from Karl Malone on a layup. And it was just, there's no place for that in the game, intentionally trying to hurt somebody. Injuries happen all the time, but the intentionality of it matters greatly. And I think right now you're in a situation with these two guys where the intentionality is without question. All right, we're going to close with this last piece for the NBA Fish segment. And right now, I thought it would be interesting for our fans to know, because we have a lot of people out there that have got both eyebrows raised when we talk about the NBA, and maybe with good measure. But the Lakers have shot, with the computers that we have right now, too, the information is just so amazing. The Lakers have shot more than 233 free throws, more than anybody else in the league. But this is the interesting piece that goes along with it, the caveat, as they say. The caveat is that they are dead last. They're DFL in the amount of drives to the basket for a game, which is how you get fouled generally.
Right, so how you getting the fouls if you're not driving the paint?
Because the NBA needs them in the playoffs, Pete. Because the NBA needs them in the playoffs. It's never been apparent right now more of what they're doing to try and get LeBron James back into the playoffs for another run. I think they embarrassed themselves with that little in-season tournament that they had, and there doesn't seem to be any end to which they will go to embarrass themselves further. Okay, so we're going on to the NCAA now. Really a lot of stuff happening in there. We talked a little bit about last week about some people holding and some people who should be dropping but aren't dropping because everybody's dropping. And so the buoyancy comes from all of the negativity. It's so many negatives that there has to be some positives in there, and your positives come from just everybody else is doing a little bit worse than you are right now. But there's 3 teams in the country right now that are holding court, that are doing a really, really good job and really, really playing good basketball. We have the Huskies up top. They've held out with the Boilermakers, and the Boilermakers, like all Boilermakers, they're not going down easy right now. Mm-hmm. They're not going down easy right now. Boilermaker, if anybody really wants to know what it was back in the day when I was growing up, it was a shot of whiskey and a beer. It was a shot of whiskey and a beer was a Boilermaker. A lot of people would actually drop the shot of whiskey down into the beer and drink it like that. But anyway, the Boilermakers aren't going down easy, and neither did the Boilermakers back in the Bronx. So Duke hangover for North Carolina. The Duke-North Carolina game was a good game. I thought North Carolina handled themselves very, very well, played with a high level of intensity. And to be honest with you, Pete, I've said it all along, and a lot of it has to come down to coaching. There isn't that look about this Duke team that you need to have. There isn't that eye of the tiger look. They're really, really talented. They've got NBA players all over this roster, but right now they're just not gelling and they're just not coming together. They just don't have it.
Yeah.
They just don't have it. But then North Carolina came out, and what we call the North Carolina Duke hangover. North Carolina beat Duke. Big celebration, big party on campus. Clemson comes into North Carolina and spanks them the other night. Clemson came in with a perfect game plan, came in with Joe Girard III and some of the other good shooters they have out on the perimeter, shot the lights out, and they ran their stuff and crashed the glass all night long on North Carolina and really, really caught them with the hangover. Really interesting to see that there's no real elite team right now, except I would say for either UConn or Purdue. It's just Houston's right there. Houston's right there of the 3, but it's so bifurcated in some of these conferences now. What's happening in the ACC, I would urge any of my fans who are watching the show, go through the ACC standings right now and tell me how many teams do you think they're going to get in the NCAA tournament? A good year for the ACC is 8, 9, 10 teams will get representation. Each one of those teams getting paid money, which then gets catfished and spread amongst all the other teams. So it's really, really important that you get those multiple teams in right now. I would say the ACC, when I looked at it the other day, they're going to be hard-pressed to get 5 teams. They're going to be hard-pressed to get 4 teams in, and that's going to be the lowest level they've had in years. And the reason that that's going to happen, same reason it's going to happen in the Big 12, same reason it's going to happen in the SEC, is because you're eating yourselves.
Yeah.
You're carnivoring yourselves, and everybody's going to come out of there. The NCAA used to have a rule where to get an at-large bid, you would have to have a successful league season, meaning you were over 500 in your league. If that's still the case, it's going to wipe out a bunch of these teams that'll have absolutely no consideration. They have the cannolis.
Right.
They got the cannolis. But when it came down to real time, when it came down to record time, boy, some of these teams are struggling. All right. So Rick Pitino came out the other day. A lot is going on about this NIL stuff. A lot is going on about the portal, all the other stuff, where teams are just basically burying the NCAA up to their head and running the lawnmower over them. And the NCAA is going, oh, my God, is it raining? And it's terrible to watch because it's a once vaunted institution that many of us lived by and lived within the confines of the NCAA. To watch what it's become right now is absolutely disheartening, to be very frank and honest. There are colleges that are going after them left and right to sue them, to get away from them, to break from them.
We thought there was hope with Weld going in there, or what his name? Yeah. No. Our former governor.
Yeah, Charlie Baker.
Charlie Baker.
Yeah.
But he just turned out to be Charlie Baker.
Well, that's I would not. It's not without the realm of possibility that Mr. Baker will be out of there soon and back into the political world very, very shortly. That's what my spies tell me. It will not be a long term for Mr. Baker as NCAA president.
With all the stuff going on with the NCAA right now, I don't see how he can survive not being a NCAA guy for a long period of time.
I don't know that they've even gone around and surrounded him with the proper sports people.
Okay.
Because his background is in health, his background is in government, and now you're in a whole different place, and it's on fire.
Right.
You walked into an arson, it's on fire, and right now I don't know what he could do to stop it without getting sued and out getting into court and all this other stuff, but there has to be something that goes on that changes it. So in this whole thing, Rick Pitino, who's kind of become a voice of reason in college basketball a little bit, and is an elder statesman of the game, very, very well accredited, well credentialed elder statesman of the game. He says that the NCAA needs to have a salary cap like the NBA does. And what that would do is cap the amount of money each team is working with each year and say, okay, up at the Power 5 levels, you guys have a $10 million payroll. I think that kind of organization and that kind of eyes on it would actually be bad for the NIL if people actually knew how much money was being thrown around here, and that there's probably a good amount of coordination that's going on out there that's unhealthy. You're going to see some of that, but to say that we need a salary cap, what that made me think of it was, as they say on the internet all the time now, tell me that you're out of money without telling me that you're out of money. St. John's is getting buried by all of these other big conferences with their big spenders, and St. John's has had a handful of very, very well-heeled boosters that have kept them going for a long time, even paid assistant coaching salaries and covered bills of that would normally be of an expense within an athletic budget. They've had boosters come in and do some of that stuff. So I think eventually what you're going to find out, it's a little bit like I think it was Margaret Trudeau said about socialism. Eventually you run out of other people's money. And I think that's what might happen here. Okay, Mark Rhodes is the athletic director at Baylor, and their coach was thrown out of a game for the first time in his career. It goes after the Collins ejection very closely up on the Northwestern game against Purdue. You had Jeff Jones earlier in the year ejected from a game with significant disparities in the free throws. So Mark Rhodes is the athletic director at Baylor, and he came out, and this is forbidden. Public criticism of officials is forbidden, and it's finable. And so the NCAA, with the little bit of time that they got left on this planet, came out and they clipped him for $25,000 for the criticisms that he made of the officiating, and basically said that they're supposed to be the best conference in the country, and the officiating in the game that he just saw was an embarrassment. And so when we say no accountability, the games are being really, really affected by this. There's a lot going on, and there needs to be some more accountability than the coach gets thrown out and the AD gets fined, when it's like we're taking the fireman who comes to put out the fire and throwing him in jail.
Yeah, you can't call a spade
after
anymore.
Somebody else lit the fire.
Yeah.
And so it's always been forbidden to be publicly critical of them. And in the NBA as well, there's fines as well. I think that might be time for some change. I don't know. I don't know how you would mediate that, but that certainly flows against the First Amendment rights of just about anybody who wants to say what they feel like saying. Okay, Pete, we are into we had our 40th show last week. That was amazing. We're going to have to do something big for the Big 5-0.
Okay.
But we're into 4-1 right now, and this is amazing to me as well. I really, really love doing this show. But we have this segment that's the young and winless, and it's a soap opera that's gone on way too long. We wish it would end. We love it, but we wish it would end as well, too. And so we keep following Mississippi Valley State and Detroit Mercy, who are now at the very, very precipice of running the table without a win. And that brings you into rare air. It brings you into territory that's very, very unheard of in college basketball. We're looking at 0-22 and 0-24. But again, I wanted to go back in through the algorithm's back door and take a look at the algorithm and just show you that Mississippi Valley State is probably well warranted last in KenPom. They are 362. There's 362 teams, and they're 362. Now, Detroit Mercy hasn't won a game all year either. And Detroit Mercy is at 359. And so Coppin State is 2-19. I don't know how they're worse than somebody that's 0-22. And IUPUI is 6-19, and they're in the same league as Detroit Mercy. And yet they're listed below them in the algorithm.
Huh.
So it just goes to show you, and we're going to talk about this when we do the Super 25. It's crazy to do the algorithm stuff. All right. Under the guise of you can never really get punished in this game. There is no punishment in this game when you reach the top levels. Will Wade, formerly the coach at LSU, on the FBI wiretaps, all over the FBI wiretaps, saying, we need this, and we need that, and we got to get this, and we got to get that. Well, LSU went ahead and fired him. One of the few head coaches during that whole entire time that got fired. Now, you could look at some of the people that disappeared during that time and go, and say, maybe they just decided to get out while the getting was good, or maybe it was time to go. Can't really speculate on that right now, but Wade was bounced by LSU, okay? His penalty was to get hired by McNeese State a very, very short time after that. Another Division I school. After hearing him on wiretaps, after watching his program for the number of years that he ran that program, it was astonishing to me the speed and the depth with which this coach was able to get back onto the sidelines. I mean, you would think that'd finish you for a little while. You know, you might catch a year, for that. Oh, right back in. Now, he had to sit the first 10 games of the year because of what happened to him at LSU. The penalties carried forward. So McNeese State hired him knowing full well that he was going to have to sit a number of games in this year, almost a third of their games. And now he signs a new contract with them that takes him up to the $700,000 range. Amazing. Here's the interesting part, and the part that I thought was a little surprising on McNeese State. All of McNeese's part, all of these coaches have buyouts in their contracts, most of them. Even the low Division I, like Rick Pitino, had a really big buyout on his Iona contract, supposedly. So they put a buyout in the contract so other schools won't talk to him.
Yep.
And if they do want to, there's a number that they have to pay in order to get that done. Where the money comes from is a lot of times, in different places, but the money usually comes up, and sometimes it can be negotiated. But right now, he has $1.25 million on him if he wants to get out of McNeese State. So he was at LSU. He got bounced out. McNeese signs him to a new contract, and then he has $1.25 million on him, which says another big school can grab him right now if they want, pay the $1.25 million, and then he's right back in the saddle, right back in the highlight. Took a 1 year, he took a pay cut, unfortunately. Went from $4 million to $700,000.
Still,
unfortunately,
he's got a
but
job.
a very, very significant chance that he'll be back. But I wanted you to hear this, and I wanted all of our fans to hear this as well, because I was researching this a little bit. I was a little shocked and surprised that you would give a guy who sat out, was suspended for 10 games, warrants a new contract right now. But the thing that was really, really shocking to me, I don't know why I continue to use that word when I talk about the NCAA, but the group that came in and dealt with Will Wade and his LSU stuff, hold on to your hat, Pete. It's called the Independent Accountability Resolution Process. Independent Accountability Resolution Process.
Clap trap.
You were on wiretap, FBI.
Right.
I don't know how that gets into an accountability resolution process. Holy smokes. All right, Miami Hurricanes. I was high on them in the beginning of the year. I thought they could do a really good job. Jim Larinaga's squad the other night, I watched this game because it was really one of the only games on that night, and so it was bad for Miami as well. But Virginia plays really good, intense defense. Not a lot of people do that anymore. But at the end of the half that I watched it, Miami had 17 points, and they were just getting throttled by this defense. They were throwing the ball all over the place. They actually looked very disinterested. I was a little surprised to see that. And right now, Miami's one of those teams I think that's fallen a little bit like a rock and coming out of it. And one of those teams that I think maybe they'll be. I'm really going to have to sit down and look on this when I get a little bit more time. But to prepare for the NCAA tournament, just who's going to get in and who's right now on the fence. One of the things that you'll have is you have all these prognosticators come in, Lunardi and all of these guys. And basically, I find them to be pretty reliable, but also they're Power 5 players. They're pulling for Power 5. They're pulling to get that tournament and the bids for as many big conferences as they can. Absolutely no question about my mind about some of those guys. But we'll start to draw some of that out for you and show you, and that'll illuminate a little bit of where they really, really lean and see, because they're going to have to work really, really hard to represent the ACC in this tournament. They're going to have to work really, really hard to get the SEC overly represented, the Big Ten overly represented in this tournament. And that's what they love. They love all those big teams because you're going to have Utah State, you're going to have New Mexico, you're going to have Indiana State, you're going to have some teams that do very, very well that wind up in this tournament. So we're back this week with our NBA Power 15. We're bringing it back. Pete has our graphic up. We're loving it. This show is growing by leaps and bounds every single day. And the reason that it's growing like that is because of our MVP, Pete. He just keeps moving and grooving. So right now we're going to go to the Boston Celtics. Again, Joe Mazzulla, 38-12. Everybody in the world will be happy with that after 50 games. But he might be the most criticized coach in the NBA right now. And if I was him, I'd have my head on a swivel, because if they clipped Adrian Griffin at the Milwaukee Bucks level, and they were number 2 in our super rating, then they can get anybody. Okay, the Clippers, they are hot. They are really, really hot and have moved right into first place in the Western Conference. They are on fire, playing great basketball. Their lineup is loaded, really. When they made that trade for Harden, some people shook their head, but then they moved Russell Westbrook to the bench, and they're cooking it right now because they have a very good lineup. They can score on anybody right now, and they're not really, since the NBA isn't about defense that much right now, they're excelling because they're really, really talented on the offensive side of the ball. So the Clippers have risen. They have won 4 games in a row, and they're 9-1 in their last 10. Those are 2 metrics I like to look at to see how teams are doing. What have they done in a row? What have their last couple of games look like? But then also, what do the last 10 look like? And the last 10 is a really good capsule to show you, because you're at about 50 games right now. All right, the Cleveland Cavaliers, another huge surprise. And there was some talk about them putting Donovan Mitchell and some other players together, trading for LeBron James to bring him back to Cleveland. And right now, the way the Cleveland Cavaliers are playing, I think that would be insane, for that to happen, because they would be giving up their best player. When I say Randall to the Knicks, I don't think Randall is the Knicks' best player. I think Jalen Brunson is the Knicks' best player right now. And to combine him with LeBron at a 1-2 scenario would be unbelievable. I don't think this does anything for the Cleveland Cavaliers, who are 32-16. They've won 6 games in a row, and they're 9-1. So when you're in a trading deadline and somebody calls you, mentions Donovan Mitchell's name, you hang up. You hang up, because you'd be giving away the best piece you have. And you can't get better giving away your best pieces. Now, does Donovan Mitchell go out to L.A. and really, really excel out there? Certainly, certainly. He could be the new young thing out there, because he's one of the top young players, talented-wise, in the NBA. But we go to the OKC Thunder in number 4, 35-16, playing very, very well. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, we've talked about a lot. It's just a good team, and they really, really have been performing well. When he was out, they struggled a little bit, but now that he's back, they're going, and they're going well. The Denver Nuggets are on the rise. They're moving and grooving, Pete, 35-16. When Jamal Murray was out, you could see that their offense was limited. You could see that they didn't have that full breath of firepower and punch. But right now he's back. They're 35-16. They've won 2 in a row, 7-3 in their last 10, and they're doing good. Minnesota Timberwolves, 35-16. This team started off as our number 2 team in our power rankings, right behind the Celtics. Held that spot for a very, very long time. But right now seem to be going through a little bit of it and have dropped significantly. 35-16 for the Timberwolves. everybody in Minnesota would have signed up for that at the beginning of the year, but they were in the number 2 spot. Now they're in number 6, and they're crashing a little bit. The New York Knicks, up and moving. Jalen Brunson is just working it. He is just working it. And the Villanova star, just great to see him do it because he's a pure guard that really can score, can do a lot of different things, and he's just running that show right now. And Randall's been out, and they haven't dropped a beat, really. They're 33-18. They won one in a row, but they're 9-1 in their last 10.
Wow.
And that's good. They were one of the hottest teams in the NBA in the month. The Sixers, without Embiid, they have dropped significantly. I'd say we had them in the 3, the 4 spot originally this year, and then they've just now with Embiid going out for 2 weeks. There you might want to see if Philadelphia panics a little bit. Do they make a trade and try and bring in somebody here to alleviate the absence of Embiid? But I don't think it's a meniscus, so it's about a month. But that could be the end of the Sixers by the time that month rolls around as well.
Sure, yeah.
Sacramento Kings, 29-20, really surprised team in the NBA this year, doing good, playing well, going to be a playoff team, and they're going to be tough to deal with in the playoffs. There's been a lot of talk about some of their guys being on the trade board, but they haven't pulled the trigger yet. They haven't done anything yet. Kevin Durant and Devin Booker are leading the Phoenix Suns, 11 in our spot there. Durant doing really, really well. Booker has had 60 a couple of times this year. One of the things you notice, though, is when all of these players are scoring all of these points, we had 60, 60, 60. A lot of the guys scoring 60s in the 60s are losing.
Yeah.
And so you're having these efforts, but they're Monmouth offensive efforts, but they're just not winning efforts. And so at the same time, they're kind of Pyrrhic victories. You go to number 12, the Pelicans. They're hanging on, the New Orleans Pelicans, 29-21, and they've won 3 in a row. They were 5-5, so the 3 in a row really buffered them up because they weren't doing great before that. The Pacers have Tyrese Halliburton back, and they're playing well. They've won 2 games, 29-23, with now Siakam and Halliburton, because if you remember, they traded for Pascal Siakam from the Raptors, and then Halliburton got hurt. And so I've been excited and interested to see what happens when we put those 2 things together, because Siakam can score like water, and Halliburton's leading the league in assists. So I think that's going to be I see what they were thinking, and I hope it works because that'll be really something to watch. The Dallas Mavericks are in the 14 spot. Luka, 28-23. They've won 2 in a row, but they're 4-6 in their last 10. And they've been hanging around this spot for a while. I think they're going to have to do something to climb if they want to. The West is very difficult this year. Has a lot of pieces moving around in there. Golden State Warriors aren't even in playoff contention right now. So there's a lot going on there. And the Orlando Magic. And the Orlando Magic in a 15 spot, 27-24. You had the Heat right there as well, too, but I'm not feeling it from the Heat lately. I'm not really feeling them lately. I don't know what's going on with them. I thought they were much better last year. I don't think they go to Adebayo enough. And now with Lowry going out, their point guard play, I don't know. We'll see. I think them adding Terry Rozier puts another guy like Jimmy Butler out there, and I didn't really see that. But you never know. All right, Pete, we're ready to move into the NCAA Super 25. I promise next week we'll get all of this stuff to Pete on time, and we'll have a Super 25 graphic as well. But right now we're going to take it right off the paper. Awesome news for our Husky fans down in Connecticut. They're number 1 in the country. And I'm going to say this right now, and I'm going to say this to people that like the game, watch the game, and go, this is the best team that has the best chance at repeating that we've seen in a while. They are really, really good on both ends of the basketball. That's where they separate from the other teams, I think. I think that Houston is great in defense, and they really, really are unbelievable. With Purdue and Zach Edey on the offensive end, when they're pounding that ball inside to the big fella, they're getting your whole front line in foul trouble, and he's just wrecking your whole front line. So, but I think UConn has that ability to play on both sides of the ball. And if you asked me, if UConn plays Purdue in an NCAA Elite 8 game, who wins that? I say UConn's going to win it. They also have the NCAA heritage, that tradition that they started last year. They set a record this year for consecutive victories. And people don't realize this, but they've been without Alex Caravan for a little while right now, and it hasn't slowed them down. And I said Valentine's Day will be the first time that they really get challenged to see if that number one is still solid. And that's held up so far because we're in the 8th of February. You got 6 days to Valentine's Day. Fellas, get ready. I'm giving you a warning right now. Get ready. And Pete, especially you, with your new fiance, that's a big one. That's a big one. And
Hey, Coach, what I'm seeing with the UConn from all their clips and stuff like that is they're loose. That's a loose team, man. They're just having fun, and that's dangerous.
that's the best description I've heard of them the entire year. Loose.
Yeah, they're loose.
They're just loose.
There's
Yep.
no tension there from what I've seen from their
About
clips.
halfway through the year last year, and I think you have to credit maybe Danny Hurley's wife for this a little bit, who's at a lot of the games, and she looks to me like a person that I knew when I was younger, just a kind of spirited young person that we grew up with. And so if you looked at Danny Hurley last year during some of the time when they were in the Big East, they wound up finishing 3rd, 4th, something like that in the Big East, had a really tough time in the league. And he looked like he was ready to go into the fetal position on the sidelines. His body language was awful. He wasn't loose, what you're describing right now.
Yeah.
And then he loosened up, and then everything went with it. Everything seemed to flow with that, and that's the best description I've heard of them in a really long time. They are loose, and when they come down on offense, boom, boom, boom. They know they're talented. They know they can do it. And when they come down on defense, they have a few guys on that team right now that are not good defenders. They're just not great at it. The young man they brought in from Rutgers is a great shooter and a great scorer, but he struggles on the defensive end. And they've made up for that. They make up with it with their intensity. They make up for it with their team play. And Danny Hurley now, Pete, I think you hit it, man. Loose. 20-2 sounds pretty loose to me.
Yep.
But that's a great description of where they are right now. And I think now that you bring that descriptor into the mix here, it allows us to see Purdue, and they're grinding a little bit. They're not as loose because they lost last year and they have that ultra intense focus. And what would you rather be, Pete? Loose or tight?
Oh, I'd rather be loose.
Yeah.
You get blinders on when you get tight like that.
And eventually, in basketball, I equate it to sometimes you walk to the beach and you pick up a whole handful of sand. And you want to keep all the sand as you can in your hand, but sand goes through your fingers very easily, falls right out of your hand. It falls out easily when you squeeze it. When you're tight, when you're loose, it'll stay right in your hand and it'll hang there for as long as you want it to. When you start squeezing it, that's the more sand that falls right through your hand. I see that a little bit in Purdue, but the big man's tough, man. He's so big, so wide, and if they pump that ball in there 25 times a half, it's going to create havoc for anybody that doesn't have a center that can match with him. And I don't know, right now I haven't seen it. Like Klingon, maybe. Filipowski, maybe. Some of those guys might be able to hang with him and slow it down. But it's going to be interesting. So I have Purdue number 2. They're 21-2. They play in the Big Ten. They took one on the chin and then came back and kept fighting and kept going. So I think they have that eye of the tiger that we alluded to. Do they go and do what Virginia did the following year after getting knocked off by UMBC? Is that their frame? Is that their reference? Is that their focus? And it looks to me like it is right now. Coach Painter, that guy finds himself in really difficult situations all the time because Purdue has no business being number 2 in the country. As far as align it with what everybody else has, Purdue has zero business being number 2 in the country. And it's because Coach Painter does such a great job. But eventually, sometimes, your job that you're doing, there's a pin that gets put into that balloon and out goes the air. And it can happen easily to a team like this. And I feel bad for Painter because he lives in that rarefied air where he's really, really willing them to victory sometimes and coaching them to victory sometimes and holding this program to standards that they haven't seen ever in years. And even in the Gene Cady era, they didn't have it like this. And so that's what I think happens with this guy as a coach a little bit as well. I think he's done an amazing job. I think he gets set up because he's brought himself to such a lofty place that the only thing you can do sometimes is fall. Houston, staying right there. They're 20-3. What you're going to see from here on out is just everybody's gotten clipped. You have teams with 5 wins, 5 losses, 6 losses in a top 25. And so some of the algorithm stuff has just gone haywire because they don't know what to do with this stuff. When you really need to apply a human touch to it, 1, 2, and 3 is easy. Now, who's your number 4? Who's 5? Because right now, that's hard. That's really hard to do. And so we have Auburn. They just reclaimed their dignity in the Auburn-Alabama match where they had gotten scuffed up by Alabama in the first game and beaten handily. Auburn came back, did a great job, handled their business on their home floor. I have them at number 4. They're 20-3. They're 18-4. They have 4 losses, but 2 of the losses occurred very, very earlier in the season to teams they should have never lost to. But we look at what have you done lately a lot in this poll and see where you're at. You know, you can have 12 cannolis and go 11-1, and now when we look up and you're 14-5, we say, ooh, you know, when you got into the whole thick of things, it didn't go well for you. So we have Tennessee at the 5 spot. We've been down on this team, but I got to give Rick Barnes credit because they got hit a bunch of times early, and they were good teams that they lost to. They were top 25 teams that they lost to, but they still lost every single one of them. But now they've kind of elevated because everybody else is falling. And so they hung around, and, you know, they're 16-5, and they had 5 losses really, really early on. And so they're playing good basketball. Barnes is a great coach, and Tennessee is a team that I would keep an eye on in the NCAA tournament. They could get going. They have a lot of talent on that team, Much like I would say Houston, though, I kind of would question some of their abilities on the offensive end. And that's where I think they could get clipped. But if they come out and get hot at the right time, they're going to be tough. Arizona, 6th, they're 17-5. They have 5 losses. They, a month ago, you know, were undefeated. And so now they've gotten clipped 5 times, but there's nowhere else to put them because everybody else is getting clipped as well. Everybody's in this machine right now. Everybody's getting punched up. And if you're in one of those conferences, major Power 5 conferences right now where you're saying, okay, we're in the SEC and we got to go to Alabama, got to go to Arkansas, and we got to go to, you know, Auburn. Like, oh my God, you know, which one of those games is you going to win? Which one of those games is a middle of the road team going to win on the road, on a hostile environment? We're talking about 17,000 fans. We're talking about cheerleader, band, confetti, storm the court. They got it all. And you got to walk in there and somehow perform and get over the top. It's really, really daunting. But Arizona stays in 6. Illinois got clipped. They're very good, but they got clipped as well. The Big Ten is a good conference, and staying up on the top of that conference is never easy. They got clipped. They're 17-5. Doing well, though. We have them at 7. I moved South Carolina this week way, way up, Pete. They are 18-3. Ken Pom, I don't know what personally has against this team, but they're at 43 in Ken Pom. They're 18-3. They're in the SEC conference. They've just had some really, really good wins, and they're holding them back. They just beat Tennessee, and Tennessee is a team I have in a 5 spot. So we took South Carolina. We're going to give them their due. A lot of people have them down a little bit, but right now they're playing well, really, really well. They're 18-3, folks. South Carolina Gamecocks, they could be back. Bobby Cremins and Frank McGuire and everybody, the ghosts of South Carolina are coming back. That used to be one of the greatest programs in America when I was a kid. They've fallen off a little bit when they got into that power conference shuffle, but right now they're playing well and doing well. North Carolina, again, we had to drop them a little bit because of the Clemson hangover. They got caught with Clemson. They got caught in a hangover. They got caught on Franklin Street having a good time. And they got bumped by Clemson, who played great. But they beat Duke in the only game of the year that matters for those guys in the Duke-Carolina game. Carolina emerged victorious and looked pretty good doing it, too. It says that they could be ready for the NCAA tournament. You're looking right now at R.J. Williams, Armando Baycoat, really, really good. Then they have Cormac Ryan and Ingram, the transfers that they brought in. That's a good, solid group. They have some younger players that are coming in and helping them, but they're getting ready for the tournament. I think they're going to be something to reckon with when they get to the NCAA tournament because they do have that power where they can hurt you inside or they can hurt you outside. Duke, number 10. They're 16-5, and I said it earlier in the year, there's just something about this team that doesn't gel with me. There's just something about this team that's missing. They have two of the best inside players in the country, the two big guys they got inside. They got good guard play. They got good wings. They have all of these people who are talented. But right now, and I don't know how easy it is to put all that talent together, but right now they're struggling a little bit. Right now they're struggling a little bit. And I go with Iowa State in the 11th spot. I like to keep Duke and Carolina tied together because I love that rivalry, and I want to see that last game of the year when they go up against each other. Iowa State, people, mark your brackets right now. This team is good. This team is really, really good. I've watched them twice now, and I like them. I like them a lot. Cyclones. They're the Cyclones. They might blow the roof right off your house if you're not careful. So Marquette coming back into our top 25 here. They've held water. They've held water. Shaka Smart has a good team. They're young. They have Kolek, who might be the best point guard in the country, though, and they're capable any given night of beating anybody. If that big kid continues to develop at the pace that he is right now, Oso continues to develop at a really good clip, that team could be very, very dangerous in the Big East tournament and also in the NCAA tournament. They're young and they're growing. I like this team a lot. People are having trouble recognizing this because they don't stay up late enough at night to watch the Mountain West Conference. And me, I'm a junkie for basketball, so I'm up all night. And if you tell me there's a game coming on at 11 o'clock, I'm like, okay, let's have a little espresso, a little Sambuca, and let's see this game at 11 o'clock. And I watched New Mexico the other night. Richard Pitino, very, very good young coach, might have found his spot a little bit because they call that place the Pit. New Mexico's the Pit. It's a great, great home environment to play basketball in. And right now, I saw their team. They're very, very good. I moved them all the way up here to 13. They're not anywhere near 13 in anybody else's poll, but watch them play. Don't do algorithm. Watch them play. And if you don't think that team's really good, you're crazy. San Diego State's really good. There's teams in that Mountain West Conference that are going to surprise in the NCAA tournament. They did last year when they went to the Final Four. When San Diego State took that run, they went all the way to the Final Four. Everybody said, wow, what conference do they play in? Who are they? It's a good conference, folks. It's a good conference. So I got New Mexico at 13, Baylor at 14. Coach Drew got bounced the other night. They're 17-5. I love the passion with some of these coaches, though, too. You know, I hope that doesn't get turned down, you know. And if you really want to, Division I coaches have a lot of impact. They have a lot of import in what goes on. And if you really want to make something happen with the referees, well, then I would have every Division I coach at some point just walk out or get thrown out. Just go out. Draw some attention to it, because right now it just comes and goes in these situational little anecdotes and nothing ever gets done about it. There's very little accountability, and it's very, very deleterious to the game right now. You can see it all over the place. It's not one instance. It's not two. It's rampant, and it's got to improve. It really does, because these young men are working their tail off to try and determine who's the best, and we should give them the best environment for which to do that in. And when you have 51 free throws for one team and 7 or 8 for the other in a Big Ten game that are generally very physical, I think we got to take a look at that. I think you got to say something about it. Yep. So I got Baylor going in at 14, Kansas at 15. Kansas has some good wins. Kansas also got clipped. And now they're 18-5, doing very, very well. Bill Self is a coach. He's going to get this team ready. Does this team have enough to get ready to be a Final Four team? I don't know. It's hard to tell. Dickerson's been okay. You know, the $2 million man, he's okay, but he's soft. Not like Edey, where he's eating up all his space inside, taking the ball and dunking right over everybody. You find Dickinson out on the three-point line as much as you find him on that charge line. That's a little bit of a problem for Kansas, I think. Alabama, 16-6. They're tough. They're gritty, but they got a bunch of losses here, and it was just everybody else kind of falling around them, which brings Alabama back into the mix. Their schedule is top shelf. Their strength of schedule is ridiculous. Every single loss that they have is credible, but they also lost six of them, and so you got to mark that up as well. They had a good win over Auburn. They'll have some good wins. When NCAA tournament time comes with them at 16-6, they're certainly going in. And right now, I don't know what the loss to Auburn does to them, but they were in first place, surprisingly, in the SEC. All right, San Diego State, I like this team. I like their program. I like what they stand for. 17th, they're 18-5. Took a little bit of a hit, but that's going to happen all over the place here, folks.
Yeah.
It's going to happen all over the place. You could, by the end of this season, have somebody in the top 10 with double-digit losses.
Wow.
Could happen. Could happen. I'll try and fight against that, but it could happen. Michigan State's in somebody, Ken Palm's top 25, and they have 9 losses right now. And I think they just like Izzo. I think they're just holding on. He's got 700 wins. They want to see him go out good, but this team's not doing it. Florida Atlantic in the 18th spot. Dusty May is a coaching name you're going to hear quite a bit when all of these other jobs open up. As much as the carousel will spin, where the real money is made is who are the next guys coming up. And we'll go into that, I think. That'll be a better segment than the hot seat segment, because the hot seat segment is a little bit like, somebody's losing their job. It's difficult, but we could talk about who are the next young echelon of young coaches that are going to come up into this. And you're going to hear any big job that opens up this year, whether it's Michigan or any of the other jobs that have been purported to open. When they do open, Dusty May's name will be all over every one of those jobs. You can be sure of that. I have him in the 18th spot. They're 18-4. They're very good. They're very, very good team. They have balance. They got the big guy Vlad Golden inside. They got Johnny Davis. They have really good play. And some of their guys do really good role player work. Dusty May does a great job with role definition, making sure the right guys are getting the ball, making sure the right guys are getting the shots. They have a good team. Kentucky, they got clipped a couple of times last week, and again, it's what I alluded to. When you upset your chemistry and you bring in a young NBA prospect, most likely, Zavonimir, I think that creates some issues. I think in the long run, they may be able to get that worked out because he is so talented. But right now, they took a couple of losses this week and dropped them down. And I almost dropped them out because they have 6 losses right now, and they've lost 3 games quickly, very quickly here. I like Creighton. I like this team come NCAA time. And I'm seeing that we got about 2 minutes left, Pete, so I'm going to hustle here.
Okay.
Creighton 16-6, Wisconsin 16-6. BYU 16-6. That's 20, 21, 22. Then we go into 23, 24, and 25. Colorado State 18-5. I still like this team. Mountain West, they're good, solid. The Rams are tough. I really like this team. I wouldn't want to see this team in an NCAA tournament if I was a Power 5. Utah State 19-4. They got hit a little bit last week, but they're a good team, and they really, really shoot the ball. A lot like the University of Utah's team as well. This team can space the floor and shoot from everywhere. And so I don't know how you defend teams like that these days. Virginia, we're bringing the Cavaliers back in, 18-5. They're playing very good basketball right now. If you're interested in who could surprise and win the ACC tournament, this team is locked down on defense. What they did to Miami the other night, and Miami has a talented offense, what they did to Miami the other night was unbelievable. Okay, here's where we're going to call a couple of algorithm turnovers just to close out. Michigan State is 14-9. Ken Palm has them at number 17. Torvik has them at number 16. Unbelievably bad. South Carolina is 18-3. Ken Palm has them at 43. Torvik has them at 38. They're 20-3 right now, South Carolina. 20-3. All right, Alabama 16-6. They have them at 7-6 respectively. That's too high. Gonzaga, they have them 22-22. They just can never say goodbye to Mark Few. And St. John's, Torvik had them at 24. They're 14-9. No way. They had Michigan State in there with 9 losses. Absolutely no way. Folks, another great week with you. We will see you next week in the zone. Me and Pete will be back, and we'll be rocking and rolling.